Good evening. I'm Dan Devaney, along with Megan Byron, our special guest, Walter Gottlieb, the producer of this fantastic look at the incredible talent of Frank Loesser. And we want to thank him for being with us. We're going to be talking more to Walter in just a minute.
Why Frank? What got you interested in this?
Well, I have been a lifelong fan of musical theater and community theater performer, and I loved Guys and Dolls and Loesser's music anyway. And I'd read the biography about him by his daughter, Susan. And I thought, you know, nobody had ever done a documentary about this great composer. Rodgers and Hammerstein had been done, and Cole Porter and the Gershwins. Nobody had done Loesser, and I felt like he deserved it. So about 7 years ago, I called Mrs. Loesser's office, his widow's office, and started a relationship with them and produced a documentary cooperatively. And it was a long journey, but I think it was worth it.
7 years. Like, you picked up a lot.
Walter, one of the things that strikes me about watching the show and listening to these wonderful tunes is we're reacquainting with this great artist, and of course, in many cases, we're becoming familiar for the first time with this work. He really did set the stage for a whole generation of musical theater, and it's kind of unfortunate. I'm glad you did this documentary, because it's unfortunate that so many people don't know about him or enough about it.
50 years ago, he was much more famous. Like, everybody knew his work and his name. Nowadays, people don't know the name Frank Loesser. If I say I'm doing a documentary about Frank Loesser, it draws a blank. But then you say Guys and Dolls. You say Baby It's Cold Outside. You say How Does He See? They're like, ah. So that's Frank Loesser. And I think that that's part of the appeal of the subject is, who is this guy that most of us didn't hear of behind all this great music?
Absolutely.
And how to succeed in business without really trying, that was really kind of a pivotal piece for him.
I'd say that was we use this word too many times in the documentary, but the zenith of his career, because he wrote the score in 6 weeks, and it was just a brilliant score, and he won the Pulitzer for it along with Abe Burrows. And after that, as you'll see, it was a little bit downhill from there, both physically and career-wise.
Yeah. What did you find out that you didn't expect when you were exploring Frank Loesser?
Well, I found out, as you've already seen some in the documentary, that although he was kind of a tough guy and he wrote these tough guy lyrics in Guys and Dolls, and he sort of carried himself that way too, and he chain smoked and he swore, that he had a very vulnerable, emotional side too, which came out, as you'll see in the next act in the show Most Happy Fellow. That's one thing I learned, and also that somebody in that business could have this horrible temper, and you see he slaps the leading lady of Guys and Dolls, and yet still be loved by the people in his family and the people he collaborate with, because he'd get mad at you, and then boom, it'd be gone, and he'd be like, let's go have dinner, you know. And it was all in the spirit.
We've all known people like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same business. It's the entertainment business. And it was all in the spirit of getting it right and getting it as good as it can be. It wasn't an abusive kind of anger. But I learned a lot about him that you don't see if all you know is the music.
Well, he also doesn't sleep a lot. You tell us about how he slept 4 or 5 hours a night.
He'd get up at 4 in the morning, and like his son says, make himself a martini and a peanut butter and olive sandwich, then maybe work till 8 a.m., and then take a nap. You didn't dare wake him up from those naps, as his daughter found out a couple times. And then he'd stay up, would take, the rest of the day, and go to sleep like a normal person. And that was that was his zone of creativity, and that's where the song My Time of Day comes from.
And then, of course, we're going to see the documentary. One of our gifts is the documentary. Is there anything in addition to what we've seen this evening?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say that the original edit of the show was 2 hours and 45 minutes long. So we obviously had to cut that down by half just to get where we are now. So where do you see some of the things that we had to leave out for the broadcast version? In the DVD. There are tons of stories from people like Matthew Broderick, Charles Nelson Riley, Robert Morse, Mrs. Loesser, and the Loesser children. There are extra bonus features like first day of rehearsal at Senior Discretion himself at Arena Stage. There's a 50th anniversary gala for Guys and Dolls that was held in New York in 2000 that you can look at. So if you're a fan of musical theater or this music touches you in any way, there's going to be material in the DVD that you're going to want to see.
Tell me a little bit about Most Happy Fellow.
That was the show that his daughter believes was closest to his heart. You saw, if you caught that part of the show, that part of the reason he wrote it, she feels, is to impress his mother and his brother that he could write serious music. It was a hybrid of opera and show tunes, which was very unusual for that time and really wasn't replicated for another 30 years. It was one of the most successful operatic Broadway musicals until Andrew Lloyd Webber came along in the 80s. It's where he met his second wife, Jo Sullivan Loesser, who was his leading lady, and it's the one that he worked on the hardest 4 years, I think, and was closest to his heart.
What was the best thing you know about him?
I think it was that he lived as passionately and humanely as he could, and he was always seeking to explain the human condition as he saw it to all of us through song, and for that we're very lucky.